What is up? What is up? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? This is You're the Vet, and I'm so glad you're tuning back into it, or if you're visiting for the first time, you're in for a treat. You're the Vet is a platform that I've given to vets so they can share their stories of their transition for other vets or other individuals about to separate, to pick apart for their own personal preferences of information, of guidance, of knowledge that they're seeking, or the questions that they have for their own personal transition. So for those of us who've already gotten out, we already kind of understand that the process of transition is difficult. It's difficult to relate to people who don't understand us. It's difficult to reintegrate with our families and our friends. It's difficult to become a student veteran or get our first jobs. It's maybe we just kind of want to unwind for the next 3 months before we know what it is that we want to do. But whatever it is, one day we're in boots and utes, and the next day we're in flip-flops and shorts. So there's a process that everybody goes through, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. But sometimes it's hard, and we need a little help, and that's why You're the Vet was created. Today, Jose Roman, or if you're a romantic, Jose Roman, joins us on You're the Vet, joins the You're the Vet family. And Jose is a veteran advocate at the Military Resource Center at Regent University. And he also owns his own company, NVG, which stands for Networking Veterans Group. Jose actually, during this conversation, was freshly back from the Student Veterans of America conference held here in Anaheim, California this year. And so he comes to this conversation rejuvenated and energized and ready to share his own personal story of transition for those who are interested. One thing that I want to point out to you before you listen is that Jose explains this process or this thought that we all experience. All the veterans have experienced this at some point when they got out. And that moment when you're called or you're labeled a veteran for the first time, it can really be confusing because sometimes we start to think, oh, I'm not a veteran. I'm in my 20s. You know, my father's a veteran, or my grandfather's a veteran, or my grandmother's a veteran. Vietnam vets, those are veterans. But like Jose mentions, it does take some getting used to. But the fact that he brings it up is interesting because I do remember the first time I was called a veteran, and it did catch me off guard a little bit. So Jose brings a ton of knowledge from starting up businesses to watching them fail and learning from the process of growth. He talks about using what you know and what you enjoy to create a future for yourself that you're going to be proud to live in. He gives some tips and tricks to the process of being successful as a student veteran, as well as some pretty good guidance on how to get yourself in front of the people who are going to help you succeed in your present or your future goals. And basically networking, which is a common theme that comes up often in these conversations. So the last thing I want to note is that we talk a lot about veteran advocacy and nonprofits. So if that's a route that you want to take and you want to learn more about, you're going to want to keep your ears open and take some notes. So Jose is given the green light to answer any of your questions. So he's got open email policy rather. So if you want to get to him, something here piqued your interest, or you've got questions about advocacy, student veteranism, I made that word up, anything that he talks about, martial arts, anything. So you can reach him at jroman@regent.edu. That's REGENT, or romanjrr@outlook.com. I'll put those on the show notes. And I had a blast with Jose, and I learned a lot. So I know I say it often, but you're going to enjoy this one. Jose, I want to welcome you to You're the Vet. It's my pleasure to have somebody from the college scene that's working with vets directly that can give us some insight on what it is that student vets can get out of the college experience, because I know we were talking offline, but I'm a student vet myself right now, and I see the ins and outs of the variety of mindset from people who are very aspiring to do something really big in life and people who are kind of just going through the motions. So I'm really excited to kind of tap into that. But before we get into that, welcome. So
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the welcome.
Yeah, and you just
I'm,
came back. You got
good to be
back
back.
from California. So,
Yeah, I just got back from NatCon 2017. That's the Student Veterans of America National Conference, the ninth annual national conference, and you kind of come back from that fired up. It's a gathering of about 1,800 different student veterans and facilitators from different universities across the country, kind of coming together and sharing best practices for student veteran chapters across the country. So it's pretty inspirational.
is it like
It's a great place to be.
the Tony Robbins seminar for vets?
It's hard. It's half Circus du Soleil, half Tony Robbins, half just big motivating uh, conference to really kind of connect with other student veterans that are dealing with the same issues, that are having the same challenges from all walks of life, from different generations, but just getting us all in the same room, under the same roof, talking about the issues and kind of figuring out what's the best way to move forward. But also the corporate sponsors that are there that are really engaged in reaching the student veteran population. That's another inspiration too. The civilian side that comes out to really support. That's huge.
Well, since we're on it right now, let's talk about the SVCs or the SVA. Sorry, so I missed out. Right, I was busy. I didn't have the opportunity. So I don't know what it's like. So I am kind of interested, and I haven't talked to my frat brothers yet about it. So, you get there, you check in, and then there's, I imagine there's conferences that you can pick and choose of what you want to go to for speaking.
Yeah, there's breakout sessions on how to connect with student veterans on campuses, how to get the most out of networking. I'm sorry if I got his title wrong, but he's the vice president of diversity. He's a retired colonel, Kevin Preston, and he does all these amazing breakout sessions on how to really connect, how to use your resume and your job experience, and really helping kind of bridging the gap between, your military service, your time in school, and what happens next, the career phase, and how to find that right career and the right culture. And here he is, a vice president at Disney, and he's spending his time, talking to, retired Joes and student vets.
Yeah.
And it's kind of inspiring. And he's there with folks from Google, and he's there with folks from LinkedIn, and they're there sharing best practices and just kind of inspiring to the group.
And so, are those guys there offering out jobs? So, are you getting there with your resume and suit and tie?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. They're there talking about career opportunities, about education opportunities. That's another piece of the conference, is that besides the education piece about how to keep students engaged, how to get to grad school and law school, there's the SVA campus where Raytheon's there, Google's there, LinkedIn's there, all these companies that are really dedicated to hiring from the student veteran population, and they're there to talk about jobs and opportunities. So it's a great all around for professional development, for the academic and scholarship piece, for the career piece. It's just a great place to be. But the real goal is to take all this information back to your campus and get the folks back at your campus fired up wherever you are. You got folks there from community colleges, four-year schools, Ivy League schools. They're all coming together and sharing their best practices about reaching the military population.
Cool. And it's somewhere different every year, right? So did they announce where next year's going to be?
No, I think it's going to be the 10th, so it's going to be a big one. So we're waiting on the SVA national folks, Jared Lyon and his crew over there of Pirates, to kind of come up with what's the next one's going to be, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be a big one for the 10th.
Cool. Well,
but Disney's a big sponsor, so they've hosted two now.
So it might be in Orlando.
There could be a possibility.
If it is, I'll be in two conferences next year in Orlando. I don't know if I can handle that 2 years.
That's a lot of Disney.
So, but Jose, I want to thank you for coming on. And one of the things I like to talk about is who you are and how you got to the military. So, who is pre-military Jose?
That's a funny question. Well, pre-military Jose, I joined the Navy I joined the Navy September 11th, 1991. So that was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was, I knew I wasn't going to college or the university. I wasn't academically inclined. I was more into, and I think this is a true story for a lot of veterans or folks that are in the service. You want to do something better, but you know that college at that time is just not the place where the direction you need to go.
Well, why was that your mindset at the time?
And for me, I had some family history. My parents passed away while I was in high school.
Mm-hmm. Both?
Yeah, that was yes, both. My junior year and my senior year, my parents were, they had some health conditions.
Yeah.
And that happened. So come my senior year, I knew I had to make choices, and the Navy presented itself in its own way, and it wasn't just the Navy. I was looking at all the services, and even today when I talk to folks that are thinking about the service, I always promote all of the services because you never know where what culture is going to appeal to you, what job opportunity is going to be appealing to you.
Yeah.
So I'm a big advocate for folks serving, no matter what the service.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, brother and a sister, older brother, younger sister. We were all a year apart.
And do any of them serve as well, or did?
No, I was first in my family.
Okay, the trendsetter.
Yeah, I guess. I guess.
Did you play sports at all, or have you always been like a natural leader?
No way. In high school I started kickboxing.
Okay.
And that sort of was a path I kind of followed throughout my experience. I'm an old guy now, but from high school, I had a friend that invited me out to a kickboxing gym in Miami. And I went out there, and the instructor there really just kind of took me under his wing. And even later on, I'd always trying to come back to that kind of culture, that martial arts culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like a guiding light for me. Everywhere I went, I was always looking for a place to train that kind of had that fit. This is a kickboxing gym. This was like that culture is in a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts gyms and things like that. It's a family culture.
Yeah.
And before it was cool. This was before UFC 1.
So when you were, how long did you stay in?
I was active duty and then a reservist off and on for 22 years.
Okay. So when you would go to a new duty station, would you look for a new gym or maybe a new community of kickboxers or jiu-jitsu?
Well, that's when I first got to Norfolk, I found a place, and that's where I made like all my friends I still have to this day that are still in the martial arts community, in the mixed martial arts community. And so I got here to Norfolk, Virginia, and I found a place, started training. And but it was never something I thought I'd make a living at doing.
Yeah.
I always kept my day job. I was in the Navy, but it was more about it was really the thing that really kind of was my weekend football type of thing, like folks do.
Yeah.
They go out and play softball and things like that. I'd go and train.
Yeah. Now, if you weren't training, did you have this like itch, or if you had been deployed? So if you got deployed for 3 to 6 months, how would you satisfy that thirst?
Oh, there's always guys willing to train.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, no matter where you go.
Yeah.
My last deployment, I was in Afghanistan in a village, and I mean, not that I made a ton of deployments. I did 3, but my last deployment, I took some bag gloves, got a heavy bag sent out there, and some focus mitts, and I had guys banging, and by that age, it was just fun.
Yeah.
And everybody would look forward to that sort of thing. You're downrange. What else do you got to do?
Yeah.
Guys will break out a couple of mats. I mean, I know it happens now. Guys will have a couple mats rolled out, and they're taking their mats on deployment. They're taking their bag gloves on deployment. It's a good thing to have.
I enlisted September 11th as well, but in 2000.
Oh wow!
September 11th, 2000, and so
wow.
obviously a year later, right? We're in this stuff, and so my first duty station was Okinawa, and the minute we got off the plane, me and my buddy who just left from Point Palms from MOS school, I think we landed and we had 2 weeks till we were on the plane to Afghanistan. We were the first the first Marine unit out there in Kandahar, and this was right when MCMAP, Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, had just taken place. So we had our supply guy, Jerry Henaha. He was the first, like, he'd gone through the first training program for MCMAP, and he's like all gung-ho about teaching us MCMAP out there in Kandahar. We didn't have mats. They built this ring, this boxing ring out of wood, and I think it was like 7 feet by 7 feet, right? And so you're like close quarters, and you're just sitting there pounding on each other. But yeah, we were getting thrown.
Oh, of course, you're the Marine.
We were
what you do.
Getting thrown in rocks and butt stroking each other. And I mean, it was. I would do it over and over and over again if I had the opportunity. But yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it took a toll on my body. But yeah, anytime we had the opportunity, I know what that's like. Anytime we'd go to the Army tents and wrestle around with them. I mean, wrestle's a kind term, but yeah, we would definitely go out there and practice some of that stuff as much as we could. So
yeah, one of our folks here locally, he helps launch that program with the Marine Corps. He's retired now, Philip Wyman, and I got to plug him. He's at Kaizen Martial Arts here in Virginia Beach. Okay. Awesome place if you're ever on the East Coast to come train, and a fellow Marine. Great guy.
So in September 11th, 1991, you had gone through the whole process of MEPS, and you sat down. Did you choose your job, your specialty, or were you given it?
No, yeah, I had no idea, like I think a lot of people, you really don't know what any of these jobs are. Well, for the most part, I just kind of fell into it. I thought I just needed to find something technical, and whatever it sounded the most technical was like, I'll do that. And the school was, the longest. So that was my rule of thumb, is like, hey, the school's 24 weeks long or whatever it was. I said, that seems like they're going to teach you a lot. So I'll do that. And it was in California. So I was like, never been to California. So I went to San Diego and did that. And then ended up in the fleet back here in Norfolk, Virginia.
Mm-hmm. So did you choose something technical because you're already thinking about the outside of the military? Or
yeah,
okay,
yeah. I mean, 17 years old, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I needed a skill.
Yeah.
So I think they offered me a couple different positions, and they said, here's this interior communications electrician. I said, wow, that's a cool title. So I ended up doing that.
So where did that mindset come from that you needed a skill? Because when I had the leadership role, anybody who walked through my door that was brand new, I'd say, why'd you join the Marine Corps? And I'd say 90% of them say, I don't know. I didn't have anything else to do. Well, what are you looking to get out of it? I don't know.
I think it's a hey, let me hedge my bets and make sure I get something out of this on the other end. So if I could learn, electronics or some sort of skill set, and I mean, I was a horrible, horrible student. But if the Navy was going to tell me that I'm eligible for this position and they're going to teach me how to do it, then who am I to say turn it down and go do something else? So I kind of jumped on that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you don't hear that often. I went in, so I told my recruiter I wanted to blow shit up, and then I ended up fixing radars.
Yeah. Okay, interesting story. I'll tell you the whole backstory since we're talking about this time. I was actually, I got into some trouble, and I had to do a bunch of community hours. And I ended up doing them at a Navy recruiting station for fighting when I was in high school. And my senior year, I was actually going to join the Army because I had the same idea. I wanted to blow shit up. I wanted to drive tanks. Yeah. I thought that was a cool idea. So I was all set. And then one of the Navy recruiters stopped by and he saw me. Like, this was after I was in and talking with the Army recruiter. And he's like, hey, don't I know you? And I was like, yeah, man, I did those community hours in your office for fighting or whatever. And he said, well, what are you doing in the Army? And I was like, well, I'm going to drive tanks. And he's like, well, what are you going to do when you're done driving tanks? And I said, I don't know. And so he said, why don't you get like why don't you try to look at these Navy jobs and see about gaining a skill? So I said, at 17 years old, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
and I ended up doing that instead.
Well,
My
shout
only
out.
regret is I never got to drive a tank. I drove a lot of different stuff, but
You know
never
what?
got to.
You're still alive though, so there's time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You know, shout out to that guy
Um,
who got you into a technical job because look where you're at today, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think whatever path you're on. I tell guys all the time, just because there's a thing you did in the military, that thing doesn't define you.
Yeah.
So, whatever you like, I switched up. I kind of found out that I hated messing with wires, and I used it as a skill set to work with a defense contractor and things like that. But I felt I got a passion for working with people
Yeah.
over working with equipment and stuff. So.
Yeah. Well,
But I did meet some guys at NatCon that were some West Coast Marines that said if I ever get out to wherever they have the tanks out there, they'd hook me up.
you got to get out. Oh, you were just here.
I know. I could have been blowing some shit up or running over cars or something.
Next time you're out here, let's hook up. We'll get you over there, because I want to drive a
that
tank
kind
too.
of pull, man. I'm there.
I want to drive a tank too, man.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you said you did 22 years off and on.
Mhm.
Now, what's that mean?
Well, 1991 and 95, I was active duty, and I was on a ship on the Saipan. Did a deployment, and I was getting ready to go out. I was like, okay, I'm done, and but I still had I still wanted to do more. I still kind of felt like I had a bucket list of things I wanted to do, and going back to school, and I figured, well, why not go back into as a reservist? So I rolled over to being a CB, and pretty much from 95 to 2001, when the GWAP kicked off. I was just a drilling reservist, working with the Navy. I got rolled over to being a CB, but I was working in the Naval Special Warfare community, and they kept me busy during that time. And I started working with a defense contractor, so things were going good. And then when the 9/11 happened, it got really, really busy.
Yeah.
So during that time, I got after 9/11, I was mobilized and demobilized and mobilized again 4 times. And in those times, I had another 2 deployments in there.
So what were you
one
doing?
One trip to Iraq, one trip to Afghanistan.
What were you doing during your time off when you weren't activated?
Oh, I worked for a defense contractor. Doing installations, working on military bases, that sort of stuff. Not the high speed stuff like chasing Bin Laden or none of that cool stuff. Just doing installations on board ships, working on bases. They call it AIT, alteration installations technician.
And this was with L3?
Yeah, with L3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so,
it's a big progress. I mean, a lot of folks do it. They'll roll right over from the military side over to a defense job because it's an easy transformation.
Yeah, I did, and I'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like you said, I'd say like the last year I was in, I was like, I never want to touch another fucking multimeter ever again. And then,
well, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
1,000%. And so, when I got out and LinkedIn had just kind of popped up and been this force to be reckoned with and helped get people jobs. And my girlfriend at the time, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, she was a recruiter. She would recruit nerds like us to come. And she told me about all this stuff in LinkedIn. And then I found myself doing the same I don't want to say it was stupid. The same job.
Same stuff you were doing in the Marine Corps.
Same thing. I had to learn different systems and all that stuff. But, chasing signals and, oh, my Lord, for 6 years. And then the same mindset as you. I want to help people, and then I went into I finished my psych degree and got my went into a master's for school counseling, and now I'm on my master's for sports psych. So,
and that's what I'm talking about. A lot of folks transitioning kind of have the mindset, and this is the traditional mindset of civilians. They go to school to learn a thing, and then they try to find a job doing that thing.
Yep.
And there's the military folks. They don't think any different. But we got a really great opportunity with this GI Bill to do something different. To take all those abstract things that we learned, managing people, managing money, working in different cultures, working abroad that we kind of take for granted, and we get to switch gears if we want to,
Yeah.
and take it in another direction. So I'm a big advocate for that.
At some point, when you don't make a certain rank at 20, I thought you could make 20 and then go to 25 if you wanted to, if you were at that point. But if you're not at a certain rank by 20, 23, then you have to get out. Is that what happened to you? Or were you kind of just ready to get out?
I was, my problem is I never went to a CB command. I stayed in the special warfare community. And when I got back from my last deployment, I rolled back over from the active duty side to the reserve side, and I knew I was done. I kind of hit my twilight. I hit the 20-year mark in Afghanistan, and I kind of looked back and I was like, man, okay, I'm good. I'm good after this. I knew I wasn't going to get mobilized again to support, so I could have gone back to just being a drill and reservist, and everything was kind of winding down. So they weren't spinning people up like they were over the last 18 years during the GWAT. During the GWAT, I was like one of those Johnny on the spot guys. When they needed people, I volunteered. I volunteered for trips to wherever they needed folks. So and it's a small community, so they really don't have a whole lot of manpower. It's not like the Marines that you guys got, like the MEU, that just you guys bring everybody.
Yeah.
These guys don't have that kind of support.
The transition mindset. How was that for you?
The first time or the last time?
The last time. The time where you're like, I'm hanging up the camis.
Oh yeah, that was kind of rough. That was really rough. I came back from I call it the post deployment hangover. And I think a lot of the folks that are in the reserve and National Guard, especially National Guard guys, I mean, we don't give those guys enough credit. They mobilized with very little notice, or a little bit of the training, but not all the equipment, and they went down range anyway. But for me, the last time I rolled out, when people say you're a veteran, to me, after I retired, even they gave me one of those big stickers to put on your car, like U.S. Navy retired or veteran. And to me, veterans were guys that went to Vietnam and Korea and World War II.
Yeah.
I didn't think of myself at the time as like a veteran.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I'm still good to go. I can still go back out the door. But as time goes by, you kind of realize it's like, yeah, you're done. You're finished. You did your time. You did your thing. And you move on to other stuff.
So you're in a position now where you're helping veterans, but there was this progression to get there. I mean, yeah, there was a progression because you were at L3 as a tech, and you were doing installs on different bases, and so you're a government contractor. And I know, like I said, we're cut from the same cloth in that fashion because that's where I went. So I know what the money's like, and I know I wouldn't be able to be in a position I'm in today if I didn't have that opportunity. And so making the decision to walk away, people
it's called the vow of poverty.
Man, people look at me in my face and tell me how dumb I am sometimes, and I'm like, you just have no clue, man. How did you wrap your head around walking away from being financially?
I worked with awesome people in where I worked, and I still keep in contact with all of them, and they're still great people, my program managers. But my unit was so busy that a lot of times I would take a set of orders for 6 months and then come back for 2 weeks and take another set of orders for 90 days and then come back and then get mobilized for a year. And that was kind of like the tempo after September 11th and the GWAT kicked off that I was on. And I saw there was more value in what I was doing on the military side than on the contractor side. That's for sure. So I knew that, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I wanted to go back to school, and I wanted to move into something else, but I didn't know what that other thing was just yet. But I had to use my GI Bill to get into school, and and that's what it was. I think it was the post deployment where you got all that time to think, that I said, you know what, I'm just going to be the old man on campus. I'm going to finish and I'm going to move into something else. And I started working in the career management center at the university where I was going to school, working with the student veteran population.
And this was at Old Dominion
University.
Okay. Was that a work study job, or were you?
Yep. I started there as a VA work study. and in the career management center, working with the military population, and that's where I kind of got exposed to this demographic all by itself, just the veteran population,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I really kind of saw, well, and by this point I'd been off and on active duty. I worked as a defense contractor. I started a business, so I had a lot of exposure to the civilian side, and I was able to talk to these guys that are getting out for the first time and going to school for the first time, and kind of being the dungeon master to tell them, hey, this is what you want to do. Commit to this. Stay in school. A lot of guys get out and they think, well, let me just take what I know from what I did, and they just fall into that trap of doing, hey, I was a master at arms when I went in, maybe, or an MP. Maybe I should go be a security guard or a cop when I get out. And they got this idea that they want to be something else, but they just haven't had anybody told them that, yes, you could do that too. You can go do civil engineering or and I had a guy, I remember, he was a team guy. He was a Navy SEAL, and he was a dog handler. And I felt like I was the first one to ever ask him. And I said, well, what do you want to do, man? And he said, man, I want to go into civil engineering. I said, that's awesome. And then I explained to him all the things he did in the service that relates to civil engineering.
Yeah.
And that's what the conversations that we need to have with our military folks is like, hey, there's other stuff you can do. Whatever you feel that you want to move in that direction, you find the right time to do it. You get retooled, you go out and get that degree or certification or whatever, and you can go in that other direction.
Now, how do you feel we can educate the women and men coming out of the service before they get to that point? Because a lot of these guys, right? I've got a friend who served in the Air Force, and he's never stepped into the VRC, and he's got his master's. You know what I mean? But the mindset of not knowing, right? They don't know that certain things translate to other jobs or other opportunities, right? Like you said earlier, the leadership traits and role that you played really translates well into what you're doing now, right? Advocating. And how do we tap into the guys getting out and let them know that there are other options besides the one that you're sitting in right now? Because the Tap and TAM program, it's
oh, they're failing.
Yeah. It's very basic to be very generous, right? So
yeah, that's true. No, it behooves all of us that are out to kind of reach back and tell those guys, at the NatCon, I talked to guys that are entrepreneurs, that are working through their universities, that are working through, some of them are still reservists. And our biggest power as veterans is the networks that we develop.
Yep.
The brotherhood and sisterhood. I had guys that were executives, at big companies that were in attendance at NatCon, and they said, it's a little different. He was telling me about how he works around big executives at one of the big companies there, and he said, you shake these guys' hands, and they're big smart guys with MBAs or whatever, but when you connect with somebody who, we got into talking about the Navy traditions. It's great, and we were, this guy was probably in his 50s. I'm in my 40s, and we talked about one of the things that we do when you pull in to for the last time on the ship is you throw your white hat overboard,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Marines have other traditions like that, but that's one thing that I remember. I was like, man, you remember doing that? And we were talking, and instantly we just start laughing about this stuff. But that's what happens is that we got this instant connection.
Yeah.
That when you come across other military folks, I've attended this veterans writing group with Armed Services Art Partnership. I got to plug them too. They got a great program. And there's a guy who's Joe Bruni, who's 92 years old. And he was a 1st Marine Division guy who did 4 beach landings in the South Pacific. And when he writes about, his experience in the military, but, he's just amazing because we all connect right away, even generations apart and, decades apart in age. We all kind of got this little culture amongst us in the military that kind of just gets us to connect.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the values that we go back to that. We got to go talk to those cats that are getting out and say, hey, man, what's the plan? What are you going to do? Are you going to school? Are you trying to start a business? Are you connecting on LinkedIn? Are you going to sit around and play video games in your basement?
Yeah.
Get out of that. That's the huge piece.
So you're talking about LinkedIn and networking, right? And I had to do a lot of research. Well, I do research. I can't have people coming on. I'm like, what do you do? Right. So
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. That's good.
so your LinkedIn has just this wide array of what you've done, from starting groups and programs and organizations that you've either been a part of or you're currently still working with them, or you created them, right? Like
Hmm.
you created the NVG where you're at right now, right? Networking Veterans Group at
Yeah.
Regent University. Did
Well,
that.
it's a little different. I still work at the Regent University Military Resource Center, and the NBG, I call it the Networking Veterans Group, is sort of something that happened in between universities, where I said, I'm reaching out and I'm working with people with their resumes, networking for careers. I was recently helping a guy who was trying to get resources through the VA, get his DD 214 and things like that. So I just launched this little I don't even want to know what to call it right now. It's a one man LLC, and I'm looking to grow it. And it's just sort of how I kind of do this thing on my own,
Yeah.
outside of what I do with my day job, which is
Okay.
sort of the same thing too.
And that revolves around, like you said, helping people get their paperwork situated or find
Mhm.
maybe a source of assistance if that you can't help with, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. So all this stuff is focused on improving lifestyles of the vets, right? How do you explore the beginning stages of becoming a veteran advocate?
I think you have to really do some soul searching and see if you're. I mean, because veteran service organizations are like the hot topic right now. I think so. They're over, especially post 9/11. Veteran service organizations are coming out of the woodwork. And I had I call him a mentor over at the Mission Continues, who told me he's a Vietnam veteran. He said, the general public will go through three phases with how they feel about their veteran population. And he said the first phase is appreciation. The second phase is indifference,
Mm-hmm.
and then the third phase is going to be resentment.
Mm.
And that kind of stuck with me, what he told me about that. And I said, there's the whole phase where where people stop you and want to thank you for your service,
Mm-hmm.
and then you kind of move it, and then there's those pockets of the population are sort of chipping away at the resources that are out there, like the post 9/11 GI Bill and things like that. There's people in Congress right now that are looking to defund those things.
Yeah.
You know, so those are the things that we're kind of fighting against. But for those folks that really want to get into helping the veteran population, you really got to seek. You don't really need a good follower. A good leader is a good follower. I connected. I wasn't looking to lead anything. I was looking to just give back. So I was I signed up with the Mission Continues, and I was a Mission Continues fellow. And I saw the things that were, I went to a Veterans Writing Project, an awesome program out of DC with Ron Capps, who was a veteran with an amazing story. So there's all these organizations that are in earnest, really trying to do some really good stuff. So giving back to those organizations that are, connecting with those organizations that are really out there doing good things, it's step one. And that kind of falls on all of us,
Yeah.
whether it's through an SVA chapter, through the Mission Continues, even through the old school legacy guys like the VSW and
Yeah.
the American Legion and those guys. There's opportunities everywhere
Yeah.
to lead. It's everywhere. It's just up to us to pick them up and run with them.
Yeah. And so that might, and okay, so
If that answers the question.
no,
Did that
it
answer the
does.
question?
So it's interesting because um I'm learning, right? This is
Yeah.
I wrote the book a year ago, almost to the month, right? And so I've really kind of learned a lot in the last year about the community. I didn't really understand what the VFW and the Legions did, right? I learned by just kind of walking in and shaking hands, but I didn't realize that all these other, like the Veterans Writing Program, I didn't realize that we as veterans, that we should consider that as a VSO. And so there are, and I can put that now, I'm looking at all the people I've talked to and people that I've called and I've spoken to. So all of these organizations that are out there helping are actually considered VSOs. Essentially, I mean,
well, a veteran. My definition of
go
a
ahead.
veteran service organization is an organization that serves the veteran population.
Yeah,
So I mean, you know,
yeah. The breeders out there who are training service dogs, right, out there.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. So if you want to be a part of the progress for, you know, improving veterans' lives, if you have an idea, like if you're a chef and you're like, I like to bake, and
Hmm.
you go out there and you're like, I don't know, supper for sailors,
Absolutely. Good name.
patent pending.
That's it,
No.
man.
Like-
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Pat Penny.
Yeah.
Trademark. Yeah.
So I mean, but
Yeah.
that's a thing. You can go out there and you're like, okay, well, I'm teaching. I'm using my culinary experience to teach vets how to be culinary artists, or, you know, and then once a month we go out and do a dinner, a big fundraising dinner, and, you know, if you're a veteran, you get to eat for free. If you're a civilian, you got to pay.
Hmm.
Look, I just created a nonprofit. Anybody who wants to take that, just, you know, put my name right there, or
Yeah,
somewhere
get an
on
honorable
there.
mention
Yeah.
in there. Free food. Free food for life.
Yeah, free food
And
for life.
and it's absolutely, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of folks that are out there doing just that. I got a friend. We just did Operation Motown Muster with the Mission Continues, and my good friend, you know, he's a retired, I don't know what you call him, an E9 in the Army, Master Sergeant. That he's doing just that. You know, he's barbecuing. And, you know, he'll take his he's got one of those tow behind huge grillers, and he'll take those out to events, and he, you know, everybody's giving back in their own little way.
Yeah.
And making huge impacts.
Yeah.
There are organizations for everything out under the sun, and you know, Outward Bound it has these amazing programs for veterans where they're sponsored, I believe, through the Sierra Club, and they take you out to like the Boundary Waters in Minnesota to do like canoeing expeditions or backpacking in Colorado or whitewater rafting, and you know, just kind of connecting with the veterans with the outdoors.
Gotcha.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's some chef. There is a program, I think, in upstate New York that turns that it's sort of like an in residency program where you go up there and you learn from like these big time New York chefs to cook. So, you know, and the thing is that all these programs, all these little niche programs are out there, and it's just about connecting with them.
So it's interesting because one of the very first people who reached out to me is a gentleman, Justin Solo, and he's got My Veteran Community. That's what he started up. And when he spoke to me, he said, you would not believe how many thousands of nonprofits there are out there for vets, and that we can't find
Absolutely.
because of SEO, right? We have problems with SEO, the search engine optimization. So, you know, individuals who don't understand what SEO is, or, you know, don't really understand the internet in general, they'll put out these grants. They have these nonprofits. And for instance, I was speaking with a gentleman from the DAV, and he said that they had granted this gentleman money to take vets out to go boar hunting. And
Wow.
The thing is that nobody knows about it, right? So
Absolutely. Let me give you a warning there. There's some bad actors out there too.
Yeah.
That are getting into the veteran space because they're kind of seeing the examples that some of these nonprofits are setting and saying, whoa, what do they got in the bank? You know, and what's the population they're serving? And they got a couple $100 million just because, you know, they're really popular, or they're a community that people think is really being underserved. Really, they're not. But there's a ton of I mean, you know, every retired 4-star out there might strike up you know, just because he's got some time on his hands, might strike up and start his own nonprofit just because. But what's kind of my metric is what kind of impact are they really making where the rubber hits the road?
Yeah.
You know, are they doing things, or are they just handing out swag and T-shirts and you know, selling their brand?
Yeah.
And that's the metric you have to look. And I used to say, and at first I used to be like, wow, look at all these great organizations that are out there. But then I started working in some of these organizations and hearing about them, and you scratch the surface, and they're really just kind of smoke and mirrors. They're not really making a real impact. Are they getting veterans in their careers? Are they helping them academically with scholarships and grants, or are they just kind of tooting their own horn, handing out swag and inviting you to the next big shindig or whatever they host?
Oh man, that's unfortunate. But I mean, okay,
yeah.
So what's in it for you, right? What's the WIFM?
The WIFM. Well, I get fired up when I'm able to help. I know I'm not going to be rich. That's just not the path I put myself on
Mm-hmm.
to be an independently wealthy. So the only thing I can do is give back. And the power, the WIFM is what you get to give back. When you get to connect with other folks and see them kind of do well or come out from a dark place, and be able to kind of contribute again in their community or give back, to the brothers and sisters. That's the payback. That's the payoff.
Yeah.
Being able to get folks to the next level. I worked with the guy at the VFW who was just amazing. This guy was we worked on the house of the widow of Carl Bashir from the movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Robert De Niro.
Oh, Men of Honor.
Men of Honor. So short story. He reached out to me, or I forgot how I heard about it, but they were she was in a wheelchair, and there was an active duty unit that supported her because her wheelchair ramp had collapsed, and this dive unit, active duty dive unit, went out there and they replaced the ramp, but then they realized that the front door wasn't wide enough for her wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
She lived in an old house, and so they reached out to the VFW, and it just became this huge network of support that came out to really kind of make this project happen and really make the place handicap accessible. But it's everybody. I think everybody wants to give back. I think it's something in you once you serve to want to continue to serve.
Would you say that that's your most memorable story, or do you have something else that really just pulls at your heartstrings?
Memorable story?
Yeah.
Working with veterans, I'm always fired up about reaching out to other student veteran chapters at the national conference. Those are always great. You make some amazing connections there, and then you stay connected online. Recently, I worked with a veteran who actually, and I really didn't know at first. His brother reached out to me and told me that his brother needed help, that he was about to do harm to himself, and the brother and the father had taken the brother to a VA hospital, and they got turned away because he didn't have a DD-214. And so the VA hospital turned him over to a civilian hospital where they kept him for observation for 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I came in out of nowhere, and I was like, well, let me see what I can do to help this guy. But I really wanted to get the story first, and I talked to the parents. I talked to the brother and the father, and long story short, I eventually talked to the veteran, and he burned his DD-214 a long time ago. He got out and just kind of didn't want anything to do with the military. And in connecting with him, we kind of talked about some of the things. He didn't finish his contract. He had a bad time on deployment. And and he was in a bad place.
Yeah.
When I went to visit him at a mental hospital, I don't know if you've ever been to a mental hospital,
yeah.
but it was a little interesting. It was a little surreal. But in talking to him, I kind of saw where he was and how we can get to a pretty dark place. And there's a lot of folks suffering out there. The statistics and folks dealing with stress and anxiety and suicidal thoughts. And I think in the smallest thing of helping him get those first steps of expediting his DD-214 and getting him resources and at least getting him on some kind of track. I'm not going to say he's in the best place now, but he's in a better place.
Yeah.
And I like to say, man, that's something that I was able to be part of. So that was the kind of like the most I've ever stressed myself out there. That, and then Operation Motown Muster, which happened with 100 Mission Continue fellows hit in Detroit for a week, and we did a week of service projects all around Detroit. That was pretty inspirational. Just that was a great experience too.
Yeah.
Anytime you get to work with an organization that gives back to the community, that's always great.
Yeah. Would you say you have something? Well, what's? Let's not even talk about that. I was going to ask what's the hardest story, but let's keep it light. So I do want to.
Okay.
I do want to talk. I noticed that you were part of the Big Brother program at some point in your life. So
wow, you really are tracking me.
Hey, I'm telling you, I'm coming for your job, ABC news anchors.
That's right, yeah.
No,
man,
but
you're like Russian intelligence, man.
Is volunteer and human advocacy something that's inherent to you, or is there a backstory behind who you are?
A long time ago, when I was doing those community hours, way back in the day when I was in high school, I didn't know it at the time, but I think the guys in that office, the recruiters at the time, were kind of mentoring me in their own little way. They were kind of, at the end of the day, and this is something that I thought about years later. It's like, man, at the end of the day, the recruiter in charge would call me into his office and he'd sit me down, and I don't remember how all the conversations went, but we were talking. And and then you get those guys throughout the service that you kind of connect with, the older dudes that kind of take you under their wing. And so that I don't know if that's what ingrained it in me, but that whole pay it forward idea or karma or whatever you want to call it, it's a great reward to just be able to kind of give back in some kind of capacity.
Yeah, you are kind of a self-starter. You're doing your own kind of, like you said, your NVG, your Networking Veterans Group, which is kind of your sole thing right now. But your first job outside of L3, you founded your own hybrid training center, kind of tapping back into your mixed martial arts, right? So, and then you were doing that for a while. So what your title was, right, or your job description you have as increased sales to over 450K a year with a new program, developed combative programs for law enforcement and military combatives, and instructed individuals in kickboxing and MMA. And I was saying that that very
sounds really cool, doesn't it?
It's like you just had this big ass pot of stuff to do, and then you made it happen for a while. So what is it like because I'm in the middle of doing this, so I kind of have my own idea about it. What's it like trying to start your own thing?
There's a lot of lessons in starting a business.
Let's talk about it.
And, we started, and I started with a partner, one of those first guys that I started training with. We went into business, and I was just an investor, one of the initial investors. And we were probably one of the biggest at one point mixed martial arts schools on the East Coast. But big doesn't necessarily mean better. We turned into a Globo gym, remember dodgeball?
Yeah.
We were just we were a 10-ring circus. And it was just a trend in martial arts. And then the trend's kind of going in the other direction where people are kind of going back to sticking to one discipline, teaching one thing. We went from Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and eventually CrossFit, and then boxing, and then TRX, and and it was kind of just going like gangbusters. So and now the business is gone now, but we brought investors on board. We had those connections with the military community here in Hampton Roads, so we had opportunity to go back and give back to units that wanted to train.
Yeah.
Because you throw a rock, you hit a service member around this region. So, but with all that money that was coming in, it was going out just as fast. It was going out just as fast. And for me, I went on my last deployment, so I was sort of one of the initial investors, and I sort of stepped away and let other people run the business.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest lessons is that you really have to own it. yourself,
Mm-hmm.
And we used to have an accountant. We used to call him the wizard, and he would sit us down and said, you really need to make this thing your own. And this is the thing with the good idea fairy, is that when you're successful, people keep introducing more ideas.
Yes.
And there's only so much time. What really becomes the most value is your time, not
Yes.
necessarily the money.
Yes.
So more and more ideas keep flowing out, and everybody thinks this thing is going full bore, but really you're just compounding all these all these directions you're trying to move in, and you kind of start getting away from the core of what you really do.
Yeah.
And the culture. Any martial arts place always has a culture. And when you go too big, you start losing the culture of that place. You'll find some gyms that are just soulless. You walk in there, you pay your $10, you get your workout in.
Yeah.
But a really good martial arts place, you go in there and you get a feel for the place. You get a vibe from the place. And we kind of lost that towards the end there, and started taking it. So that's a cautionary tale: is that you have to take ownership of your thing, whatever it is, from beginning to end. You got to ride or die with it. And that's my takeaway. But also, that's pretty much the big takeaway, is that you really have to. I was an investor early on, and and then I would go back to being an active duty, go back to being a contractor, and I really wasn't minding the store like I should have. I left it over. I kind of really left it with people that meant well, but when it's your own enterprise, nobody's going to take care of your enterprise like you will.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. It's like they could have the best of intentions, but they're only going to do, they're going to do what you pay them to do.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And if you're not in the place, it's going to run amok. And that's sort of kind of like the direction it went.
Yeah. I just had a very large lesson learned myself. You said one thing that was part of it, and that's your time. Your time is important, right? And so when you start taking on too much and compounding all this stuff, you're taking away. And I write in my book, it's called How to Grow a Beard, a Military Transition Guide Back into Civilian Life. And so there's a chapter in it talking about sacrifice and how we have to redefine sacrifice. How, in the military, hey, get your sea bag and get on the C-130 is normal. And it's like, hey, I'll see you guys in 3 months. It is what it is, and then you probably did the same thing as a contractor. It's like, hey, I got to bounce on this install for however. Oh, yeah. I've been here a month. Oh, you still want me to here another month? Okay, well, but as a civilian, my wife at the time was not cool with that. And, to me, I'm like, this is, oh, yeah. Hey, it is what it is. That's how I'm putting food on the table. But I had to redefine that whole mindset of sacrifice. We're sacrificing our time for our family or our happiness now, and we don't have to do that now that we're out. So that was one lesson I had to relearn this last job, and it was the big lesson I took from this last business venture was that if you don't have the same vision or the same end goal, it's not going to work out. I've tried twice now, and if you're not on the same wavelength or that same frequency of thought of how it should be built, or even like if one person's kind of holding back from growth, right? If they're just stuck in their ways, and you're like, hey, let's try, like, no, this is how it's, then you're not compatible.
Absolutely.
And you can't force compatibility when it comes to business, right?
No, absolutely. Look at the lessons from like guys like Steve Jobs or those other guys that are out there that build this thing and say, hey, we're sticking to this thing, and it's a new thing, nobody's doing it, but we're gonna stick to it, and that's where the success is. That you gotta ride or die with that thing. It's gotta be your vision, and you gotta be the one to execute on it. And it's very tough to have other people. You'll have other people that are buying into your success, but they're not gonna be 100% on as much as you are on where you want to take something.
Yeah.
That's the biggest lesson learned is, I saw a question pop up. It was like, hey, I wanted to start this business, but my wife doesn't, it's like, don't. If you need encouragement from someone else to start a business, don't do it.
Don't do it.
If you're counting your business, if you're going to think you're going to leave your leave your job to start a business, and make a living, that's not true either. You gotta. It's like grooming a baby for adulthood. That's what I called it.
Yeah.
Everything you make is gonna go right back into that business if you want to grow that business.
Yeah. And that's true to say for the student vets going out there and getting degrees in, I don't know, like business or my big stickler is psychology, right? Somebody will go and I'm like, well, what are you going to do with that afterwards, right? Because you really can't do anything unless you have your master's. And like there's
Absolutely.
things that I know about my field that I like to pass on when I hear people get in there. But I know guys that have gone through their process of utilizing their GI Bill, exhausting it, and they're like, I should have done something different. I went in for the living stipend, just to get a degree or something like that.
Absolutely. So, I tell you another thing that happens, and I do a lot of student writing for veterans, and I tell folks that are in these fields, degree fields, that they've never done nothing but sit in a classroom with their butt in a seat. I said, if they're going into marketing or communications and they haven't done an internship or talked to anybody in that industry, and then they're on the other end saying, well, now I need a job. It's like, no, you should have been looking for a job as soon as you started this job.
Day one.
Your school.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not connected to that industry, and say if you want to be a journalist or a communications major or a marketing major or whatever that is, you need to be in the arts, any of the arts. I don't discourage anybody from being an artist, but you better be an artist while you're learning the stuff from the book and sitting in the classroom.
That's right.
Because you need that flight time. You need to make that network, those connections, and that's the biggest piece to take away.
So is your role at ODU different than your role at Regent?
Yes. I started at ODU as a student as a VA work study. So I started over there as a VA work study while I was finishing my degree in the Career Management Center. And then I got an interim appointment at ODU, but not working with the military population, sort of working at a distance learning education center, which was in a different city. And that was a year appointment. And between there and my time here at Regent, I started here at Regent in August of last year. And first thing I did when we get here is like, hey, I really want us to build a central military resource center. This was all side of all my lessons learned from being in the SVA, from being a VA work study, from seeing what really kind of resonates with the military population. So we came on board. I came on board early, from the get-go, and I said, hey, this is what we want to do. We want to be a resource for the region, not just for student veterans, but for our active duty folks, for our dependents, for families. For all our military affiliated people. So we're sort of like a one-stop shop, and we try to pick up the slack for the TAP GPS classes. We try to, we try to be a one-stop shop for those things. But for the most part, it's educating people about their GI Bill, their benefits, and then setting them up for success on the other end.
Do you have a program that, if you don't mind sharing, that you think that each VRC or student veteran community on campus should adapt or should work towards getting, or maybe collaborate with other colleges on creating? Is there something that's on your mind that should be in the schools that's not in the schools right now?
Absolutely. A dedicated veteran student orientation. I always used to make the comparison to what we do for other demographic students on campus. And we have, universities roll out all kinds of programs for different demographics to students. So, we'll do orientations for international students. We'll do dedicated advising for students. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing, campuses can have is dedicated academic advising for veterans and veteran student orientations that are tailored towards the military population.
Yeah.
The other side of that is green zone training, training for faculty and staff to sort of know how to relate to the military population.
Okay. Yeah, those are fantastic because I, my first round in grad school, I didn't know anything about the veteran community on campus, and then my second go round, it really just changed my student experience. So, I went to the orientation, and I had already been, in my second year of grad school, I had already been a student. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, let me just go to this orientation. And I recommend it. If you're listening to this and you're about to transition into the college process, or even if you're in college right now and you're listening to this, and you're not involved with the veterans on campus, I urge you to just go in, say hi, see if you can go in. I mean, we just have couches and people come and fall asleep on them, so.
Yeah, that's a big one. We do a transition Thursday event, we call it, and it's just a time that we're open to answer questions, but then we'll do a formal student veteran orientation or a breakout or something that tailors to our military population. And that's the biggest piece, is that veterans on campus need to connect to not just the veteran community on campus, but also the college, the campus community.
Yeah.
It kind of just helps them get through the experience a lot easier. If you connect with your campus, you're more likely to stay on campus and finish and use resources on campus to make sure you're setting yourself up for success.
So what would you tell vets that are struggling to find themselves today, with transition, with employment, just who are just struggling in this whole getting out of the military process?
Well, for veterans out there that are struggling through the process, or families of veterans that are, come across this message, and it's a get that person connected to their military population. Not necessarily, well, their student veteran population. It's so important that you reach out, and if not at the local school, reach out to SVA National, and they'll connect you with great people in your area. It's so important that you do this, because this is how we're going to find our next careers. It's going to be the network, connecting on LinkedIn, connecting on Facebook, connecting in person, and reaching out to that population. That's going to be huge. And it doesn't matter if it's something that directly helps you, or if you're just doing a referral for somebody else. I've talked to folks at the airport that told me, hey, I'm getting out and I'm going over here, and I'll just drop a bomb with them. I'll do a little, pull my phone out and say, man, have you talked to the SVA chapter here? And I might find them on Facebook and say, hey, these guys are doing stuff, because there's scholarship opportunities, there's grants and things, there's a professional development that's happening, and all that. Those are all kinds of good reasons to stay connected. To not be the lone wolf, sitting in the back of the classroom thinking you're gonna make it through it on your own.
Yeah. And there's a lot of those.
Yeah, no.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for guys who have not gotten out yet, about to get out, getting ready to get out, what's some good advice you have for guys who are about to make that transition?
And this is what happens when it's kind of like a catch-22. You're at work until you're not at work anymore. So your mindset is whatever your job is in the military. And this was me when I first got out. I was like, hey, I'm working until I'm not working anymore. So I'm not thinking about what happens next. It's sort of like you don't think about your next job until you're fired. So it's sort of like you have to really chip away and think about it now. If you're a year out, now's the time to really start hatching a plan for what you're going to do next. I did a ed fair at Camp Pendleton. And I remember I heard some of the things that I heard when I was getting out. Guys saying that they're going to collect unemployment and live off of that, and then try to go to school and start living off their GI Bill. And that's not the case. That's not a plan. That's sort of just like that's not going to sustain you, especially if you got a family.
Yeah.
or you want to not be eating ramen noodles. You got to be able to save a little money, but also just start reaching out. You'd be surprised the people that are out there that'll answer your questions, that'll help you get situated, that'll make sure that they're sharing their lessons learned, so you don't got to go down the same road.
Yeah.
Start applying for financial aid. If you're going to grad school, start applying for grad schools a year out. Because they're more than welcome to accept you, and then wait. The colleges are in no rush to bring you on board, at least good colleges. And if you're going to going on to higher ed, reach out early and make sure that they do have some sort of veteran connection center or student veterans group or somebody other than a certifying official that's just there to take your money.
Yeah.
Reach out to people that are really going to talk to you about what your ultimate game plan is going to be.
What I want to go back to one last question before we go kind of wrap it up. And What are some of the most common issues that student vets have that can be solved at this very minute during this conversation right now?
The common issues. Academic advising is one of my biggest pet peeves. A lot of times, guys are rolling into programs that aren't transferring to where they want to be. If you have 36 months of GI Bill, why would you start at a tech school or a community college when all those general education, and I mean, I'm getting into the weeds a little bit. You want that 36 months to pay for as much of your education as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So don't waste it somewhere for a certificate, or go into it with the ultimate goal in mind. If that goal is law school, talk to people about how do you get to law school, and make sure that that GI Bill is going to be there for law school.
Mm-hmm.
And there's ways of doing it. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. So always keep that always go into it with the long game in mind, not just what's in front of you. Sort of like the community college. I mean, community colleges are great if that's your ultimate goal, is to get an associate's. But if your ultimate goal is a career where you need an MBA, where you want to be in law school, then start making those plans early.
And what are some of those ways? Some of those ways are grants and scholarships, or are there other programs that you recommend?
Scholarships, financial aid. A lot of folks are not using financial aid. They think financial aid. Traditionally, student veterans are first generation students on campus.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that they're sort of missing out on with scholarships, grants, financial aid, that they're not taking advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
When I first got out, I said, I got a GI Bill. I don't need to take on any loans. But there's Pell Grant. Pell Grant's a big one that's money left on the table.
Mm-hmm.
There's the VA pays for tutoring. If you're a GI Bill recipient, the VA will pay up to $100 a month in tutoring. And I never knew until somebody showed me the form, and it's like, hey, it's a VA form. You fill it out, you send it off, and they're paying. They're electronically sending you money for your tutoring.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of money on the table that you just don't want to, you don't want to leave behind. So make sure you're using all of that. Using a VA work study. A VA work study is a great way to transition from that thing you did in the military to an office space.
Yeah.
Whether it's either work with a Veterans Resource Center or a registrar's office or some other place on campus, it's a nice way to transition into another career.
Yeah. If you have some links that I could post up with your conversation when it goes up, please shoot them over. So yeah, or even some of that information, because I knew about Pell Grants and first generation scholarships, and even Voc Rehab. I talked to people about Voc Rehab.
Voc Rehab's a good one.
So,
but any of these things I mentioned, like the Mission Continues, ASAP, the Armed Services Art Partnership, what are some of the other things? Oh, the Outward Bound Veterans Expedition.
Okay.
These are all great programs that are out there. I'll shoot you those links so we can share them.
And so kind of wrapping it up, are there any other topics maybe that you want to hit that we didn't get to talk about at all?
Oh man, no, I'd like to keep it light. I don't know, I don't know what something to put out there, but there's a big movement about changing the classification of certain discharges.
Uh-huh.
I read an article about other than honorable discharges being moved to honorable discharges, and there was an ask from the president to just make all these folks that served that were left with other than honorable discharges to be honorable discharges. And I thought, wow, that's, what does that mean? I don't know. It was something I was kind of wrapping around my head. I was like, what is do all these folks deserve the same resources, or what can we do for those folks that are out there and kind of, maybe they had a bad time in the military, or they never should have been in the military to begin with, but then they're left off.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of like something that's been kicking around my head for a while. But
yeah. My best friend in the world, he joined a year before I did. He went through boot camp, then NCT, right? We have this kind of 2-part stage. Well, on his way to MCT, so he'd only done the 3 months of boot camp. On his way to MCT, it was Christmas time. They all went on break, so they got an extended break. He came back home, and then on his second time on the way to MCT, he was like, I don't want to do this. And then he just never went. He went deserter, right? And so,
wow, okay.
He actually, well, not deserter because we weren't in time of war, but he went AWOL. But long story short, he did his time in the brig. He turned himself in, did his time in the brig, and this was all over a girl, right? He was in love. He was smitten in love. So 3 months in boot camp, smitten in love, ruined his career for a girl. And now we're sitting here 16 years later, and he's like, man, that's really affected me. And so, we've gone through the process of trying to get that changed. But yeah, there's a whole plethora of stories out there. You're right. What deserves it and what doesn't. And so, no, that's interesting. And I'm interested in that. I'm glad you brought that up. So I'm going to look into that. Yeah.
I mean, you could just take callers or folks that just got these horror stories like that, and it's like, well, where does the buck stop? You know, do these guys need a second chance? Or, I mean, because there's a stigma attached to it, and I just been thinking a lot about that recently. So that's probably a topic for another discussion.
So what contact info do you have that you'd like to share?
Well, if folks want to find me on Facebook, they can do that. They can find me on LinkedIn. Jose Roman, or they could. I mean, I'm pretty wide open. They can call me at my phone 757-348-7093.
Okay.
Shoot me a text. Yeah, if there's anything I could help them with, they want to ask more questions or follow up with what we do here at the Military Resource Center at Regent. Gotta plug that, or what I do with NVG, Networking Veterans Group, or just want to pick my brain about maybe something I mentioned. I'm all ears.
Well, I'm definitely keeping open contact with you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, you already got all my stories.
Oh yeah, I got you. I like to ask this at the very end. We had this whole conversation in order to possibly improve one person, if anything, just one person, hopefully more. We had this whole conversation to improve somebody's life. Is there another vet out there that is doing something kind of phenomenal? And I know you know him because I wrote down like 7 names. So, but is there somebody that you think would be beneficial on this platform?
Oh, wow, man.
Because I'm going to call them out.
Let's see. One veteran doing awesome stuff. Man, to narrow it down, the leadership, I tell you, there's so many great folks over at the Student Veterans of America. There's Mike Stack over there who's doing awesome work. The president and CEO, Jared Lyons, doing amazing stuff. And let me tell you, Ron Capps has an amazing story. Write this down, the Veterans Writing Project. Ron was a Army veteran who he wrote his book, Seriously Not Alright. He went to 5 wars in 10 years, and 3 of them were genocides. So he was a diplomat with the State Department, but he was also, I believe, with the Army Reserves.
Okay.
So he was in Afghanistan, Iraq, Darfur, in Croatia.
Oh, the Veterans Writing Program. Okay. Somebody just sent me a link to sign up for that.
Yeah. Ron Capps is amazing guy.
Okay. Good to go. Well, You know what, Jose? I can't even begin to tell you how appreciative I am, and I want to thank you for taking the time out. I know it's the evening time on the East Coast, and it's time to go home and have some food in your belly. So,
no, this is great, man. Hopefully it didn't suck.
No.
And hopefully folks will hear this and they'll reach out or get something out of it.
It did not suck. It totally, absolutely, just a good story, and then a lot of good knowledge being shared today. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So this is wrapping up You're the Vet. If you're still with us at a minute or an hour and 20 minutes into it, I thank you for sticking with us, and I really appreciate you guys listening to Jose's story, and I hope that something that he was able to share with us is able to help you, or you can pass it on to somebody and help them. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of You're the Vet, and we will see you next week, or speak to you next week. Out.